Okay, well, I've got my machine here, which I can ask the questions, and you've got them in front, so you can probably see what's coming your way. While I'm just gathering myself, I've got a quick question. I think it was for Rachel, actually. You are in a very privileged position in various areas to spot where the technologies are short and where they need to help. And one of the things that came out throughout the conference has been, how do we pass that information on to the schools and the training and the skills area? Are there any links along those lines? And do you have anything in the future for trying to not only shape what you're doing for industry, but also to capture what they do and say, can we pass it into the schools and colleges for technology developments?
Oh, good question. Because we are operating across pretty much, 30 partners across the UK. We've got a good handle on some of the gaps. The skills work that is happening separately, albeit it isn't sort of meant to be part of what the centres do, it kind of becomes ingrained in what we do. So we are working across all the sectors, talking to industry partners, talking to colleges, we're linking in with other, so there's the electrification skills network based in the Midlands that's operated from WMG, and we're kind of bringing it together to help facilitate that. I think what we do recognise is we've got this just unbelievable gap that I'm not sure, you know, how quickly we can fix it. We're just doing it, it's like all hands on deck, excuse the pun, to sort of fix those gaps really, and provide flexible and provisions for engineers, whether it's reskilling or upskilling across the park. And I think as we start this journey, I think events like this are really helpful. I would just say get in touch, because you know, I'm kind of one person out of many, and I think the more people that you guys talk to and help give us that information will really, really help.
Yeah, thank you. Any other panelists want to come in on that subject? No, I've got to move on then to Jake, I think it is. But this one's from Keir Gravel. Which do you think would be the better place for maritime nuclear, putting it in small reactors in ships or using reactors to create cleaner net zero fuels?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the question. I think the first application is it's always good to take easy steps first, walk before you can run. So I think the more near-term first application is for shore-based nuclear to produce energy vectors. So whether that be hydrogen, ammonia, or whatever, or just electrical power. That's the easier first step for nuclear in this domain, I think.
Any other thoughts on the port side, Ashley? How do you feel about a nuclear reactor in your port?
Open. I think we all need to accept there is a challenge with future fuels, isn't there? And nuclear reactors in ports would not be let loose without appropriate controls. So it's important to work with the technologies that are coming through. Is it something that I see in the next 5 years? No. 10? No. I mean, it is something to be mindful of for the future. And it really is probably the ultimate end product for sustainable fuel. Every other fuel we talk about is pretty much an interim measure, isn't it? And really ultimately we're looking for something that will be able to sustain us beyond maritime in the port industry, and that probably is nuclear, and I think we probably need to recognise that.
And I'd like to progress that question on a bit to Oscar, because everything, what you covered was a rather nice vision of how you can migrate and where the dangers lie. And so how would you see nuclear fitting into that pattern? And just to widen that a little bit, how do you see the infrastructure fitting into your pattern of what you're going to put of your fuels in ships? How can they keep pace? It's just a matter of providing fueling. I know Hamburg's looking at hydrogen and other places. So how do you see infrastructure coming in?
Yeah, I mean, infrastructure is going to be critical, and I do agree with the view here on nuclear that most likely the early application is for generating electricity that then generates the fuel. And I mean, the key is hydrogen is to start with, but as I try to explain is that is most likely not the energy carrier that will go on most ships. It will be ammonia or synthetic methane or something else. And we need infrastructure for that, and it will require new things. I mean, we've seen how long it has taken to build out the infrastructure for LNG. I started promoting LNG more than 20 years ago, and we are still in the early phase of that, building out that infrastructure. So if we now start with the new fuel, it will take time, and unfortunately we don't have time in the world to wait for this. That is why I personally like synthetic methane as a good fuel, because then you have the infrastructure there as LNG.
Yeah.
So it's the quickest path to getting these power to X or green fuels in building up the infrastructure. Unfortunately, synthetic methane as also green methanol is complicated because both of them require carbon capture from a renewable source. And that makes actually ammonia slightly more attractive. So I do see that we need to build out ammonia infrastructure for ships as well. So start with, so those are the kind of my main two fuel options that we need to start building for.
Thank you. Do you want to come back on that or no? No? Big tank, right. And I want to move on now to the one from an anonymous. Seamus or Ben, do you see the resistance to using autonomy from maritime surveys, whether or not this would be from industry, regulators, or public good? And actually, I think either of you, I'd quite like you to talk a little bit about how you take the regulators with you.
Yeah.
Which is the bit that you, as I sort of alluded to from the front of the stage, you can't go to a regulator and the regulator says there's no regulation, so you can't do it. There's got to be a whole new philosophy approach to this. And so perhaps you could talk to both of them. We'll start with you, Seamus.
Yeah. I was talking about this yesterday with someone. I'll go on the industry first. Industry will love it. As long as it fits the requirements, it reduces the cost. And as long as they get what they require for their licensing, they'll like it. It's not a problem on that front. I suppose in terms of health and safety and MCA approval, you know, we just got to worry about a vessel being out there that's potentially a hazard to other transiting. But that's pretty much covered. I don't have too much, I'm not too much aware of that side of things, but what the issue may be in that. Regulators is a problem, or a potential problem, I should say. Because they're very set in their ways about, especially when I'm talking about the environment here, and what they wish to be done at any point in time, and any change to how things are done it takes a lot to get them on board, and that's what we have to lead with the regulators. So what we do is, and what we do now, if we're doing anything to survey an area, we will involve the regulators very early on in the discussion, because especially people like Natural England as well, do like to be involved when they're asked to at the very start, rather than providing them something at the end and saying, can we do this? They get the hump on that one and then don't turn it around for another couple of months. But if you involve them early on, they're quite open to things. But you do have to sometimes really push them and explain to them the merits of doing it like this, and explain, you know, what drawbacks may be very early on, because otherwise you will find a problem with the regulators.
Thank you. Ben, do you want to add to that?
Just to echo exactly what Seamus said, engage early is the experience, I think, in the autonomy sector. Both in the military, and I've seen the military context where they didn't engage properly, and actually there was 6 months where they had a vessel they couldn't take it to sea because a regulator wasn't engaged, there was no safety case. The trouble is, of course, that their regulator, and it's no slight on the MCA, absolutely want to advance it, but they're not, the resource isn't there to progress things quickly. So then it becomes quite a long, protracted progress. People get frustrated, so the temptation is just to disengage, but that's the worst. You need to stay engaged with the regulator, bring them with you, I think. So industry wants to push ahead, regulator does want to push ahead, but there's friction. And the other side or subset of regulation is things like the port safety cases, engage with the port, build your safety case and make sure you can operate. But bring your regulator with you, absolutely.
But you've operated in, if I may, and I'll come back to you, you've operated in the aviation industry, and the aviation industry are very clever at passing on information about things that have gone wrong. So it goes out to the whole industry very quickly, and they come up with a fix. Now, that in the new, in some of the other more traditional regulators, that doesn't always happen. Is there a way for that to come into the system?
Yeah, and learning from experience, I think, is absolutely key, and we're very keen to do that. And certainly, organisations like MERB are involved in a lot of the workshops and things to try and learn, excuse me, how you legislate, and then what happens when it goes wrong. How do you learn the lessons quickly? Yeah. So there's a desire to do it. It's turning that into reality, I think, is always a difficulty.
And Oscar, you wanted to come in on that?
Yeah, I mean, as a company, of course, we are working on quite a lot of autonomous cases and have been, and I must say that we've seen a lot of interest and activity from the regulator's side to be part. They want to do it, and sometimes they are pushing us even further. So I'm happy with many of the flag states are very keen on creating the autonomous regulations and so on, and also class societies. But it's good to work with many of them. You don't want to stick to only one or two, because they do tend to have, then you can a little bit pick the best from different and share the learning. So.
And Jake, you're sitting across nuclear, I remember it well, and aviation as well. So would you like to add to this debate?
Yeah, and I think it's just an echo of what you said, engage early. So, nuclear is a highly regulated industry, both defence and civil, and where there has been some friction over the years. The Dreadnought safety case I won't go into, but it needs to be a collaboration with the regulator, because we have to do it together. So nuclear for maritime, I said just take one thing away from the presentation. If I can add another one, it would be we need to start looking at the regulation and the legislation to now, early, because that'll probably take longer than the engineering development. And if we don't start now, it won't be an option in the 30s, 40s, 50s, as you've said. So we have started those conversations, but it's really,
I think that's
really
right.
important.
We've got technology in tidal, but actually we didn't even start putting that before the government until we got consents. And consents take 2 to 3 years and quite a lot of money. So we do need to engage very early on, actually, very early on. I've got one now for Ashley. Port operators are under pressure to turn ships around as quickly as possible. Delays equal penalties. What assumptions have been made to make battery recharging time when in port? And that's from Richard Newton. And I also want to just add to that. Just answer that one to start with, actually.
I don't think there's been any assumptions made on that. Yeah, there is penalties on ships to turn around, but I think there's technology that's to be developed. The technology isn't there yet to take on that challenge. The ships Richard's probably speaking about are likes of container vessels that operate extremely tight schedules. That technology is not there yet to implement that into those types of operations, and when it does become available and is implemented, it obviously will be a key part on timeframes alongside. A ship operator operating a container vessel will never implement a technology like shore power that would, or a charging facility that required 14 hours alongside to recharge the batteries. That technology would be implemented with a 6-hour charge, a 10-hour charge, because that's the time the ship will be in the port. It would be a balanced approach to implement those types of technologies. So I don't believe there's a need to go too much into the detail of each ship would be specific, each ship, each circumstance would be completely different for battery technology, and it really probably is not at that stage of.
I'm going to turn to Oscar, but I want to add a bit to you, Oscar. Which is another question further down. Batteries are made of rare materials that don't come from UK, and so we're giving ourselves a vulnerability here, whereas hydrogen's everywhere. So, Oscar, if you answer the first and the second, that would be great.
I think the first. Basically, I think that question about charging time was referring to a little bit the study that I showed about the Ro-Ro vessel, and it is a point. This charging time is because on one hand you want to make a ship very quick in port, and that design, what we had, very wide ro-ro deck, is fast in port, but there's no point in making it too fast because then we don't have time to charge it. So it is a balance. But really to find the feasible electrical solutions or battery ships, you need to a little bit think about this, lowering the speeds, lowering the power demand, and go a little bit against the normal economy of scale that we are so used to. I mean, everyone has been building bigger and bigger ro-ro vessels, but if we're going to make electrical ones, we need to scale down again, because otherwise the lights will go out in the city when we start charging them. We will not have 50, 60 megawatt of charging power in ports. So
We could help you then.
definitely. But coming back to these rare metals, yes, it is of course a topic with batteries that there is a life cycle emission coming from the production of batteries. However, in marine, we do see that they are used so much that actually the lifetime is the bigger part, and or the usage of batteries save in quite quickly. And of course, as we heard yesterday also, there are new technologies in batteries coming that will require less rare metals and so on, and that will definitely help. And so new battery technologies are coming all the time, and that's important.
And I'm going to gazump the questioners and just ask a question from myself now. All of the stuff we've talked about involves some constraints and some solutions. And some of the industry sitting out there are thinking, oh my goodness, that's another batch of work and a lot of cost. But there must be a success-based approach in some ways, in that when you develop these solutions, how are you looking to sell them overseas? And how are you going to take these solutions you've got and say, actually, you could come and learn from this? And why don't I start with you, Ashley? And perhaps your study is one way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is probably key. It's about us finding a solution and offering it. We're not expecting people to pick it up, but it is just about offering that complete package, demonstrating a joined up collaborative approach for that solution, and then taking it out. And I think the market would be welcome to that, rather than a sales pitch from a particular operator, a particular manufacturer. It's a closed loop solution.
Yeah. And Ben, you're doing that kind of work on the autonomous side. Have you got ambitions to sell your regulation, if you like, or to sell your approach to regulation?
Absolutely. It plays into the sort of UK as a global consultancy, I think, and we know there's an Innovate UK mission to Canada, in the maritime area. There's work with, I think, Lloyd's MPL and Singapore. We want to work with Lloyd's to classify remote ops centre, and then that becomes a scalable model to take overseas. If the UK classifies the first ever remote ops centre, well, actually, other countries will want to see the UK classification societies or the UK system as the global leader. And there's a really good report by, I think, LSE, Nick Lambert Associates, and one other that came out last year that identifies first mover advantage as an export. And a lot of those things are in there for the UK PLC as a whole.
Thank you. Rachel, do you want to talk about what you're doing and how that can benefit overseas?
Yeah, well, I was actually chatting to somebody at the break. The challenge we have in the UK is that all of the funding for different elements, so whether it's what I'm doing in PEMD, whether it's battery or hydrogen, is separated. And it's just the way that the government do the funding. It's a pain, because actually bringing it together means that somebody has to try and help that coordination, and it's, there's little old me here trying to do that, and we're working really hard to bring that together, and we'll continue to do so. But what we're doing is trying to provide solutions to industry and grow the supply chain. So the benefit here is that if we can do that and make it successful for companies, so then they can export, grow overseas. But likewise, we're also encouraging investment into the UK. So I'm currently talking to a manufacturer, for example, in China, to put a facility in the UK, more jobs, etc. So it doesn't really matter for me in terms of who's doing what. It's about actually who needs it, how we bring those collaborations together, because you can't have a conversation about a machine in a drive without having a conversation around the energy type, whatever it might be, bringing that together and helping a full solution.
Thank you. Now, the elephant in the room, of course, is, this is from Ken Holberg. What are the long-term decontamination costs of microreactors? So it's a tricky one, and I thought it's worth bringing it out now.
No, it absolutely is. It absolutely is, so thank you. Because we have to answer these questions head on with nuclear. You know, there are challenges with the nuclear, but there's huge benefits, so we have to be open about it. When I was talking about the kind of the energy density, and uranium is a hugely energy dense fuel. For these microreactors, the cores are, I mean, we have a model outside, so please come and see us, we can have a discussion. But the cores are really, really quite small. So for, you know, not much bigger than a waste paper basket, we're talking for 10 years operation at 10 megawatts. So the actual costs associated with decommissioning and then long-term storage of that fuel are not too significant to make it unviable. And I showed some of those economic numbers before, because we have to bake in the end-of-life decommissioning costs into the overall cost of ownership, because we cannot be left, you know, we cannot just be left with a load of these things sitting around at the end of life. And part of the concept of that is that these, especially these microreactors, are factory built, deployed, and then returned to a factory for factory decommissioning to really bring the costs down.
Thank you. Any other? Just in case anyone hasn't managed to get on to the app, are there any other questions in the audience that I can pick up? You'll have to wave if you can't see. Okay, that's a very good one, and then, because you're standing between everyone and lunch now, so okay.
Yeah, I mean, it needs to be a renewable source, so you cannot go and get it from your power plant. And actually, some studies made in Denmark show that there is not enough CO2 that is renewable for making the marine fuels, which is a little bit odd. I thought the problem was that we had too much CO2 in the world. But yeah, so forest industry, other places where you are there, where you need to source it, but it complicates the fact that you need this renewable source of CO2 where you put it on.
I think I'm going to draw stumps there. I'm going to get everyone to lunch, otherwise I shall get lynched. But just on behalf of all of you, I'd just like to thank the panel for an incredibly interesting morning of presentations and some incredible food for thought, and perhaps some good lessons for how we might move forward in the future. So thank you very much indeed, and thank you very much.